Welcome to the Maritime Executives podcast series, In the Know. I'm Tony Munoz, Editor-in-Chief. Our Executive Corner podcast will provide conversations with top executives concerning events and issues that are shaping our industry today.
Hello, I'm Audrey Mejia, Assistant Editor at the Maritime Executive Magazine. And on this episode of In the Know, we'll hear from Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia-Henry as she and Editor-in-Chief Tony Munoz discuss the challenges facing the maritime community and the mission of the World Maritime University under her leadership. Listen in.
Today, we are pleased to speak to Dr. Doumbia-Henry. She's president of the World Maritime University based in Malmö, Sweden. She is the first woman president and the seventh president of the university. She is a distinguished international lawyer and spent 29 years at the International Labour Organization. She is known as the mother of the MLC, as she consolidated 68 of 72 international labor conventions into one. We are pleased to have you, Doctor.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you so much. What is the mission of the World Maritime University? And why is it located in Malmö, Sweden?
Well, the first thing is, yes, it is located in Malmö, Sweden, because Sweden was the first government to raise its hand to host the university. And so since 1983, WMU sort of headquarters is in Malmö, Sweden, a lovely city. And Sweden, the government of Sweden, they are fantastic hosts to the university, particularly the city of Malmö. The city of Malmö has been just tremendous in every respect, in terms of enabling us to even to have additional facilities already, that it would be 3 times. We've had facilities made available, extra facilities made available by the city of Malmö. So there's been a very engaging partnership with the government of Sweden and the city of Malmö.
What is the mission of the university?
Well, the university's mission, when it was established, and still is its mission today, is really to educate I would say to educate maritime personnel from around the world, but in particular from developing countries. But as we have it in terms of its mission per se, it has been set up to educate maritime and oceans professionals. The university's charter was amended to broaden it to include the oceans, and that happened under my leadership, something for which I am very, very proud. But as part of the United Nations institution, it is the academic arm of the International Maritime Organization, with that mission to educate, build capacity, undertake relevant and of course cutting-edge research that could enable the maritime community to actually foresee the issues that are ahead, while we provide the platform on the basis of which these issues are discussed, where we undertake the necessary research and enable IMO as the mother institution of WMU to be always at the cutting edge of the issues and addressing, like today, issues relating to greenhouse gas emissions and of course the COVID-19 pandemic.
So why should somebody study at World Maritime University versus another university? What makes it different?
What makes it different, it is a United Nations university. That's the first important difference that I could identify. The second difference that it is dedicated to maritime and ocean issues. It's a university that's extremely specialized in these fields, and therefore with the capacity to help build, to help enable, in fact, those who go and negotiate treaties in the IMO and participate in IMO decision-making, that they take on board all of the new issues that are coming up and that have to be addressed, as well as undertaking research work with respect to the existing body of international instruments that govern maritime. Maritime is a global industry, and therefore it has to have global rules applicable to it. Otherwise, it's chaos, as you could well imagine on the oceans. Right. And so having an academic arm like WMU enables us to actually project the issues that are coming up, like decarbonization, for example, and having these addressed sometimes under difficult circumstances at IMO, but for us as the academic arm, we can go out and undertake research that actually puts on the table for the IMO member states to discuss some of the big issues that actually must be addressed. But with climate change, there is no doubt of how important it is to have issues relating to greenhouse gas emissions and addressing them, and in not only integrating them into our curriculum, but making sure that we provide capacity, help build capacity and provide expertise to IMO member states whenever they need it.
So the university began about 40 years ago. Is the curriculum and is the mission still relevant today as it was when it first began? It was to develop people who could work in the IMO, who understood conventions, who had, you brought in, everything's changed in terms of decarbonization and gender equality and these types of things. Is the mission relevant today with the curriculum?
Yes, I would say categorically yes, because the way in which our mission is expressed, the mission is expressed as WMU being the world center of excellence in postgraduate, maritime and oceans education, professional training, and capacity building, of course, importantly, and research. So, that is what we can do to make as an important contribution in what is an ever-changing world. And the issues are getting more and more challenging. And with COVID-19, we can see how, again, a mix of very complicated issues are coming together. But you have to have an academic like WMU focused on an area that is not in everybody's everyday, in front of them every day. Very few people know, and that part of I think the challenge of a university like WMU is how very few people who know that such a university exists that deals with maritime and ocean issues and educating people to do so. But what is, in fact, I'm very pleased to see that in more recent times, we have had a growing number of, intake of students who are not undergraduate students. Our students are our postgraduate students who are often, and that's part of where I would say the mission is, to help build capacity, particularly for developing countries, to enable them to be in a position to engage effectively in all of these big governance discussions that the international organizations, and in particular, in this particular case, the IMO is having. Greenhouse gas emissions today and environmental pollution are among the big challenges.
The pandemic obviously created many challenges for you. And as president of the university, what are some of the challenges you faced and what are you doing about it?
Well, clearly, I could see a very practical part. There have been some very practical components of this COVID-19 challenge. Our students are coming from the developing world, and which is across the globe. And therefore, with COVID-19, getting our students from their respective countries, from the Pacific, to Latin America, Southern America, to to Asia, of course, getting them, of course, Africa, getting them to WMU has been one of the biggest challenges, because of course, with COVID-19 and all the lockdowns, it was very, very difficult for us to imagine that we would have students for this this is now continuing this academic year since the COVID-19 started. But we were able to do so. And I would say the government of Sweden was very supportive in making sure that irrespective of the countries they came, they would be able to enter Sweden. So that was really a very important thing. And all we had to do was to make sure they were able to get onto airlines that were still available and running in their respective countries. And so we did get much more students than we expected, although a few, probably about 10 students could not make it. But we made the rest of them, of course, 10 students studying from a distance, but most of them were able to make it to Sweden, to Malmö.
You are known as the mother of the International Maritime Conventions. You brought together 68 of 72. Tell us a little bit about your role in working and bringing these together. I think as a distinguished lawyer, an international lawyer, and an educator, what did you see in these conventions that made you go through those efforts to consolidate into one?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Well, of course, it's very close to my heart. Well, I worked in the International Labour Organization for 11 years as a lawyer. What I would say that when I joined the ILO, my areas of expertise were already maritime issues, maritime law. I come from a country by the sea, so I was always very keen on maritime issues. And in fact, my doctoral thesis, when I wrote my doctoral thesis, it was on the carriage of dangerous goods by sea. So you can see that even before joining the ILO, I had a passion, because I come from a small island developing country. I had a passion for, this very open ocean that's out there, and all what it does for people, but without realizing it. So when I joined the ILO as a lawyer, I of course trained as a lawyer. When I joined the ILO as a lawyer, they recognized, and I think that was one of the reasons they brought me, they recruited me instead of somebody else in that very competitive environment. They recruited me to do all the commercial side. So I appeared to be a bit more commercial than I was, I would say, in other areas. And so I was the person responsible for all commercial components of, let's say, contracts and everything like that relating to, at that time, in the legal office of the IMO. And then when I was reviewing the various conventions, because I had looked at all of the conventions as part of my PhD thesis, including not just IMO conventions, but also ILO conventions in the maritime field. In fact, ILO started legislating in the maritime field well before the IMO. Many years. ILO started in 1920 with the first international instrument up till today. And these are these instruments. When I in the legal office, I realized that when I looked at this body of maritime instruments, there was, each little issue had an instrument. And I looked at the ratification rates and its implementation. And I realized that this, okay, it's a good thing to have all of these laws and all of these international treaties, but if only few countries ratify them, the impact was limited. And therefore, I came up with the idea of consolidation. And the ILO is a unique institution. It is tripartite. And the issue was getting the tripartite on board to take a new approach to making sure the international regulations, whether they be conventions or recommendations, that these international treaties, they are actually not just on the books, but they are in action. And the ILO, in fact, I must say, they put a lot of confidence in me and enabled me to move this great, big, huge complex system of instruments together. And I would say that because the ILO is tripartite, the tripartite components really accepted and agreed that if we were looking at a global sector like maritime, if we wanted to have these instruments more effective, we had to come up with a new approach. And so the time came, it took a long time of getting everybody on board, but finally everyone got on board. Did a consolidation of the existing instruments, which were at the time, we consolidated 68, we left aside about 3 instruments. So consolidating these instruments all into one, it took time to get everybody on board, but eventually everyone got on board. This great bandwagon going forward together, and that led. It took 6 years. It took 6 years, but it took 6 years of patience, 6 years of tenacity, and 6 years of engagement to get everybody on board and realizing. And I'm so proud that today everybody realizes this was the best outcome that anyone could have ever imagined, which meant not just governments coming on board and of course, seafarers as a very important category at sea. Seafarers, it was very important for them in terms of their working and living conditions. And so everybody came on board, governments, the ship owners came on board, the seafarers organizations came on board, and everybody worked together. I was just sort of, okay, the person that brought everything together. But the sort of little maestro there, in this little band, but it was a big one because all governments came on board. And I was so happy that it took 6 years of intensive and extensive negotiations. But at the end of that process, the convention was resoundingly adopted with only one country abstaining. Everybody voted in favor of that convention. And as a result, I think it is one of the ILO's most successful legal instruments in terms of the impact that it has had and is having. Of course, shipping is global, and by virtue of its global nature, it was really a good outcome for seafarers, for ship owners, and ultimately, of course, for where ships are registered, therefore governments.
Yes, definitely you leveled the playing field for mariners and ship owners, and we thank you for that. It was great work, and we're honored to have you here. You'll also have been a champion of gender equality. How does the industry foster this, and what are you doing at WUM to make this happen as well?
Yeah. Yes, I think one of the big challenges that the maritime industry has is really effectively addressing gender equality. So it's one thing to talk the talk, but then to walk the walk is the more difficult. And today, we still have such a small 2% of women are at sea, maximum 2%. We think it's less, but maximum 2% of women are ready to go out to sea. Of course, with COVID-19, it has made it even more challenging to attract women to go to sea, considering how badly the men were impacted by COVID-19. So I think a lot of women would have many, many new ideas in their than they would have had before, but it creates an extra challenge. But indeed, the idea of ensuring that countries would do the right thing, because maritime is an international industry, and for maritime to work, to be able to effectively, let's say, deliver on the outcomes, on the results, including not just for ship owners, but also for seafarers and for the IMO itself, moving together to deal with all of the issues in a bundle and not separately was the way to go. And I think that it has borne fruit, and that I think what we would have otherwise seen, of course, the COVID-19 has made a difference right now, but we actually have seen coming together again through the COVID-19 pandemic, how much the industry realized that they have to work together with a view to achieving the results that are required.
World Maritime has been pretty significant in its research on maritime and ocean studies. Are there a couple of projects that you think that World Maritime University is making an impact on that you can share with us?
I think we are making right now a very big impact with, one of the big issues today for the maritime industry is decarbonization. That's our number one big issue today, decarbonization. Outside of COVID-19, decarbonization is it. If we have to have, the climate change issues, under the UN SDGs, we all know goal 13, climate change, is the responsibility of everyone. No one can be left behind with this very important, probably the most important issues today. Right. And we see the impact of climate change around us all the time. We see what's happening. And so I think this is the big issue of our current times. And addressing that effectively means everybody needs to come on board, not partially, not in bits and pieces, but together. So this is really where I think, again, all the organizations, because at the end of the day, they are interlocking parts. So one side can do and do well, but if the other side, you've got an imbalanced scale, that's not going to help. And so I do think the biggest challenge today is decarbonization, and we have already a mandate to do that under Goal 13 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we all now know the impact of climate change and what it is having on all countries. And now is the time, despite COVID-19, we cannot put the issue of climate change aside.
It's more like a climate crisis today.
It is a climate crisis.
We're all seeing it. Nobody can hide from it. And thank you for that. So looking at some of the key factors in sustainable maritime in light of what we've just learned about COVID. How do we run our ships and run our ports and move cargoes? What I think we learned that from mariners being left on board for months and months, getting them off, changing crews. These are all major issues that we're all facing. And so tell me about how do we advance maritime sustainability under these circumstances?
There is no doubt that there is no doubt that all that was anticipated and intended is not going to move as fast as we had expected them to by virtue of COVID-19. So COVID-19 has put a big brake on a lot of work that has already been ongoing in terms of sustainability. And there certainly will now be, we call it a slowdown or retraction. We hope not retraction, but with a view to being able to leap further rather than go back in time. And so, we will need ships and we need ports. We need ships and we need ports. And even during this COVID-19 pandemic, shipping continued to deliver as much as possible of all the medical equipment. Some may have gone by plane, but in terms of the huge supply chain to move these things forward and to enable all countries to have access to, and we still know that they haven't, have access to COVID-19 vaccines. So we can see how important shipping is, because it is the most effective mode of delivering these, in my view, including COVID-19 jabs that we normally we all end up getting. So I do think, of course, there's been a bit of a, the shipping industry has been impacted, but not as much as aviation has, not as much as any other mode of transport has. So it still remains, and I see, and I know, and I have been writing about the seafarers that are serving for now much too long, too many months at sea before they're able to disembark. Because of COVID-19, they can't disembark in foreign ports. Foreign ports would not allow them to come in. So there's a huge concern that we must all have for the length of time that those who've been at sea continue to be at sea, because of course they come from, today's seafarers are coming from the developing world, and they come from a range of countries around the world. So when they, boarding a ship or having to try and transit and transfer to reach their countries, even if they were allowed to leave that ship, it has remained a tremendous challenge. And so many seafarers, more than 200,000 of them, are still at sea, not being able to return home after, well beyond the maximum 11 months of under the ILO Maritime Labour Convention, not more than 11 months at sea for any seafarer being able to disembark and go home. But today, now with COVID-19, many of them remain at sea, because even if they were to disembark, many ports will still not allow them to disembark, and then they have to disembark, transit, and transfer before they can get home. So many hoops along the way. This is one of the things that concern me, that people don't see and know every day, but it is something that I worry about, because I do realize that so many of our seafarers are negatively impacted with, and the mental health issues will be a big one that will have to be addressed we hope not into the future, but as soon as possible.
Absolutely a human tragedy. However, it is being addressed, and people like you bringing it to the forefront. We hope we move on this quickly and get them some relief. What does the future hold for World Maritime University, and where do you see it in, say, 5 years?
The future. Well, I think what I'm hoping is that I hope that the work that I have done to date, I'm now into my sixth year of being at WMU, that the work that I have done to date, from building on the work of my predecessors, because no one can do this alone. What we can, each one of us, do when we get that chair is to take forward the work that has already begun and see how far we can take it. We can take it with a view to strengthening the institution, with a view to making it dynamic, with a view to making sure that the big new issues of our times are addressed, and addressed appropriately. And as an academic institution with academic freedom, we have huge opportunities that otherwise, even the fact that WMU belongs to IMO, by virtue of our academic freedom as an academic institution, we are not, let's say, how would you call that? We are not constrained by the fact that we have to be careful about what we say, because it may create certain challenges or issues, because issues like that have been expressed. No, as an academic institution, of course, we have to use academic freedom wisely. And as part of the United Nations institution, we have to show that we are best in the class. However, we must call out when we see something is wrong, or we must say that what is going on with respect to seafarers today is wrong, and we have to address it, and address it now. And if necessary, I will put as many press releases as I can. Of course, they are tired of me doing that, but as many as I can, with a view to putting this issue and keeping it on the back burner and not letting it die, because We depend on them for so much of everything that we need and use every day. So yes, there is a lot of work still to be done. There is a lot of issues that are coming up, and I'm very glad that issues relating to greenhouse gas emissions are at the top of the agenda. This is extremely important. Energy efficiency is key. Climate change issues are key. We have to be part of that, bond of people coming together, institutions coming together, governments coming together to all address these issues, each one with their expertise and bring in, of course, what it is they have to add. The idea is to add value, not to just cloud and add numbers. We need value, and we need them to have impact. Question is, everyone has to evaluate their own impact. There is not a centralization of how all of this can come together in one place. Of course, we have the United Nations, but then people tend to go off that grid. And how do we get everyone working together to address these issues? And climate change is there to stay for a long time to come. And the next generation will ask many questions if we don't address them.
Indeed. What does the future hold for you, personally and professionally? And where do you go from here, Doctor?
Yeah, well, I consider myself today an academic. And I love writing. I'm all the time, right now, for my holidays, I'm writing an article. So, I mean, I will continue to write. I think that is the space that I have. And when I no longer have these responsibilities, I'll be able to say a little bit more than I would normally say on the, of course, although I have academic freedom, but as the president of the university, I don't have as much time to do all the writing I'd like to be doing to come out with some interesting suggestions as well. But I think that, I've been dealt a very good hand by God, and the opportunities that I've had have been extraordinary. I have never taken any of it for granted. And I always feel that giving back to society, giving back to community, giving back to the maritime industry, giving back to labor issues, which is my other passion. I have of course, my passion in terms of labor rights. I will remain a champion of all of those who cannot be the champion of themselves or for themselves. I think that's what I'd like to be, and be critical, but in being critical, one must also ensure that there is balance, and that criticisms laid when they are really required. But there's so much going on now today. COVID-19 has changed so much in our lives that we've got to rethink what the new normal is going to be like.
Dr. DoumbiaHenry, it's a great honor to have met you on our podcast. We look forward to putting out the magazine featuring you in the next week. And it's a great honor to listen to you speak about the issues that are confronting our industry today. And we thank you.
Thank you for listening to In the Know, the Maritime Executive Podcast. We hope you'll join us again for our next exciting industry discussion. In the meantime, you can visit us at maritime-executive.com for top news on critical maritime issues.